Hello, my name is Sandra and I will be talking about the importance of assessing students' literacy so that educators can identify areas students need support in. Each of the 5 components of reading, which are phonemic awareness, phonics, fluency, vocabulary, and comprehension, are a part of literacy. With proper assessment and support, we can help students grow in these areas. The first component of literacy is phonemic awareness, which is the ability to identify and manipulate letter sounds. A literacy standard for phonemic awareness is TEKS 110.2 subsection 2, which says the student develops word structure knowledge through phonological awareness, print concepts, phonics, and morphology to communicate, decode, and spell. A developmentally appropriate way to assess for phonemic awareness is through formative oral assessments. 2 skills that we could focus on are segmentation and blending. So, for an assessment, we could ask students to break apart different words or put different sounds together to make a word. To determine if students are successful, they would have to correctly complete at least 4 out of the 5 exercises. For students who are struggling, it might be helpful to go over these strategies in a small group setting so they get the focused support they need. And for students who master the skill, they may be able to help other students practice these skills or practice these skills as they begin to write, allowing them to apply the knowledge they know. The second component of literacy is phonics, which is understanding how letters work. A literacy standard for phonics is TEKS 110.2 subsection 2b2, which says the student is expected to demonstrate and apply phonetic knowledge by using letter-sound relationships to decode, including VC, CVC, CCVC, and CVCC words. A developmentally appropriate way to formatively assess students is by having objects that begin with different letter sounds and having letters on cards and having the students match the objects to the corresponding sound or letter. The phonics skills we could focus on are word parts or letter sound correspondence. To determine if students are successful, they must be able to complete most objects correctly. If we have 10 objects, they should be able to complete 8 correctly. If students struggle with this, the same assessment could be done as a large group activity, and the students who are successful could take turns leading the rounds so they are able to reinforce what they learned by modeling. The third component of literacy is fluency, which is being able to read accurately with speed. A literacy standard for fluency is TEKS 110.2b4, which says the student is expected to demonstrate and apply phonetic knowledge by identifying and reading at least 25 high-frequency words from a research-based list. A developmentally appropriate formative assessment would be to time students for a minute and count how many words they can read, or to have them read a couple of sentences and assess how many of those they can read correctly. If students cannot read 20 out of every 25 words correctly, then students should move on to smaller reading passages so that they could practice correctness, and this would lead to fluency. If students are fluent in those 20 out of every 25 words, then they should move on to bigger reading passages so they can be fluent even bigger reading passages. The fourth component of literacy is vocabulary, which is knowing what words mean and using them correctly. A literacy standard for vocabulary is TEKS 110.2 3b, which says the student uses newly acquired vocabulary expressively. A developmentally appropriate formative vocabulary assessment would be to match vocabulary words to corresponding pictures. The successful completion of this would be matching most terms to the correct picture. So we have 7 exercises for vocabulary words, then 6 should be done correctly. For the students who are successful, they can move on to making their own illustrations or even definitions for vocabulary words. For those who struggle, the teacher could work with them one-on-one to find vocabulary and help them make a mental visual and come up with a definition that will help them know how to apply this knowledge on their own. The fifth component of literacy is comprehension, which is the ability to understand what is read. A literacy standard for comprehension is TEKS 110.25e, which says the student is expected to make connections to personal experiences, ideas, and other texts and society with adult assistance. A developmentally appropriate summative comprehension assessment would be to have a student orally share about a similar experience from something they have read. For example, after reading The Little Engine That Could, we could have students share individually about a time that they were afraid to do something, but in the end they were successful. We can determine if a student is successful doing this activity because they would be able to share about a time that they were scared and that they were successful in the end. If students are successful doing this activity, we can prompt them to think even broader and further. We could have them think about something by asking a question like, what is something you could do if you feel fear when you have to complete a task? If students are struggling with this task and prompt, then we could model correct thought process so that they're able to answer in the future on their own. I leave you with this. Assessments are not just another task we have as educators. They're a strategic tool that we can use that provides instant feedback to pinpoint exactly where our students stand and what they need support with. Both formative and summative assessments are beneficial depending on what skill is assessed. It is our duty as educators to be intentional as we assess our students to support them effectively on their path to become strong, literate readers. Thank you for your time.